Twitter. We have had Mike Heller on before. Great at what he does, 97.3 The Game. Milwaukee, Fox Sports also 1070 The Game in Madison for the entire state of Wisconsin. Talk show host. Mike, thanks for your time on 365 Sports with Paul Craig. I'm David Smoak. Did the firing of Paul Chryst surprise you?
Absolutely. Yeah, without doubt. I thought it would be something that they would give consideration to with the body of work when the season would be complete. To do it 5 games into the season was a big surprise, I think, for all of us.
Mike, are things different now that Barry Alvarez isn't the AD? Do you think that they will look for a different type of coach who doesn't necessarily have a Barry Alvarez line? Or is this all in hoping that Jim Leonhard gets it straightened out so they can just keep that guy?
I think that Jim Leonhard is going to be the coach. I don't think this is an audition. I know that the interim tag is the official tag. It's a public university, so they're going to have to post the job and go through a process. But I don't believe for a moment that Jim Leonhard or that the next coach at Wisconsin is going to be anybody other than Jim Leonhard. I do think that there are viable candidates out there on the national scene. Dave Doran, who's at North Carolina State, the former Badger assistant. Certainly Lance Leipold at Kansas is going to be a name that everybody's talking about. He's got deep, deep Wisconsin roots. Those guys, their names will likely come up, but I do think Jim Leonhard is going to be next.
Mike, as you said, you were surprised when you heard the news, but having had a little bit of time to marinate on it, does it make a bit more sense? And when you look at just the firing itself, why does it make sense to do it right now?
Yeah, having a day, about 24 hours almost exactly, to sit on this, I think the only reason it makes sense is that this is the current standard operating procedure in Division I college, in FBS college football. There have been now 5, unless I'm missing one, 5 FBS Power 5 programs that have removed their head coach less than 5 weeks into the season. Colorado and Wisconsin, the latest, but Nebraska and Georgia Tech and Arizona State on that list. I think that the pressures of the financial side of college football mean that this has to be done. In other words, I guess if this would have happened 2 years ago, it wouldn't have happened, right?
Right.
2 years ago, I don't think this happened at any of those programs. And by the way, none of those programs that have removed their coaches have been because of scandal, right? These have all been mainly because of wins and losses. And of those other 5 or the other 4 programs outside of Wisconsin, I don't think people realize that Wisconsin in the last 3 years under Paul Chryst, they're 15-10. They're 15-10. He's getting fired after his first 5 years of 10-3, 11-3, 13-1, 8-5, 10-4, and then 4-3 in the COVID year, 9-4 a year ago, and 2-3 right now. He's being fired now, I think, based on maybe some appetite for Jim Leonhard to go someplace else by other programs, and just the business of college football having evolved so rapidly and so extremely.
Yeah, the only one that has a little possible dirt in the firing is Herm Edwards because of all the
agreed.
some of that, but nothing like you said, a scandal.
But that was also bad football, yeah. Yeah.
Steve Peterson, when he fired Frank Solich, made this quote: "I refuse to let the program gravitate into mediocrity. We won't surrender the Big 12 to Oklahoma and Texas. We know Solich had put together a hell of a record, and Oklahoma and Texas at the time were really good." Is there any concern that could be the case here?
Yeah, I think, I'll give you another Nebraska example. When they fired Bo Pelini, right? I think Sean Eichhorst said it's not good enough. And since then, they have been much worse than they were under Bo Pelini or Frank Solich. So I think it is a careful what you wish for scenario. I think Jim Leonhard will be good here. And I do think that I don't think they would have done this right now if Jim Leonhard was not on the staff. So I think that they feel comfortable and confident that Jim Leonhard, who's never been a head coach, that Jim Leonhard can be the guy, the next here, came from here, played here, cut his teeth here, came back and got a job from Paul Chryst before he had ever coached at all. And a year later, he was the defensive coordinator, and they've been among the nation's best defenses for 7 years running. Up until this year, I think he's going to be the guy.
Mike Heller with us on Wisconsin firing Paul Chryst here on 365 Sports.
It's probably not this year because you have the same coordinators and everything, but do you expect to see him, particularly on offense, where they're not who they used to be? Do they need to be somebody different on offense? Do you expect him to maybe change schemes a little bit, or does Wisconsin have to win the way they've always won?
No, I don't. I think that is the conventional wisdom is that Wisconsin has to win the way that Barry Alvarez won. I don't think they can win that way anymore. I think they have to have a quarterback that is multidimensional, a quarterback that can run and throw. They've tried to have quarterbacks that can throw, and they haven't been good enough to have that. And I do think that they're going to change a little bit of what they do offensively. They just let me paint the little picture here. Wisconsin is not filled with 4- and 5-star recruits at the wide receiver and defensive back position. They've got to get those players from other places. But what they do have here is a bunch of big, strong offensive linemen that occupy a lot of space in the National Football League. And they need to continue to get those young men who become really big young men and play on Sundays later on. They need to keep getting those. You can't lose sight of your identity of being an offensive line university, but you've got to be more diverse in what you do at the skilled positions, not just at the running back, but at the receiver and absolutely at the quarterback position. The best quarterback the program ever had was 1 year with Russell Wilson. They have to be more diverse in what they do from the quarterback position.
Well, they need to be able to draft off that, right, Mike? You know, Russell Wilson make it seem cool. Of course, he's having a rough year, but also they've got a quarterback down the road who's adopted them as his favorite program. He didn't even talk about Cal anymore, right?
No, I mean, Aaron is, he doesn't talk about Cal anymore. And everybody's looking for that guy, right? I think Lance Leipold has one of those guys at Kansas right now that can beat you with his legs and his arm. Everybody's looking for it. They're rare. They're hard to come by. Wisconsin needs somebody of that ilk. Let me take you back to one other point that I made earlier, talking about the patience that is college football. I'm going to give you a little blind sample set. In 2000, Wisconsin went 9-4. In 01, they went 5-7. In 02, they went 8-6. And then 7-6. In those years, they were 13-19 in the Big Ten. They went to the Sun Bowl, to No Bowl, to the Alamo Bowl, and the Music City Bowl. Barry Alvarez is a Hall of Famer. Would Barry Alvarez, in today's coaching world, would he survive that 4-year run?
No.
Yeah.
No, he wouldn't. It's an incredible example. There are some Hall of Fame coaches that had their rocky times, but ended up coaching in the same place for 25 years or so, and they had to dig through what was, at least under the standard, thought to be not quite enough. Here's the stat. You mentioned the coaching today. Last year, there were like 15 coaches in Division I or FBS football. Total buyouts were $94.4 million, from Orgeron to Mullen, Patterson, et cetera. This year already, 4 coaches, 5 including Chryst, have already totaled $46.5 million in buyout money.
Yeah, and somebody answer, you guys probably talked about it when it happened, but somebody answer this question, how you justify at Nebraska firing a coach with a buyout that was going to go down by $8 million if you waited 3 weeks.
I think it was so toxic after the loss to Georgia Southern, the way that they had
what else could happen?
Because look who they are. They got blown out by Oklahoma. They found a way to beat Indiana. They're no better. I just feel like they wanted to get a jump start, and that's why we're seeing these early coaching changes.
Yeah, and it's entirely possible that is the reason why Wisconsin made the decision yesterday. I don't have anything on this, but I can speculate and wonder as to whether other programs were getting close to Jim Leonhard.
Yep.
Because Jim has been offered, you may not know this, because it's not national news all the time, but Jim Leonhard was offered the defensive coordinator's job for the Green Bay Packers a year and a half ago and said no to stay here. They've been sniffing around from other Power 5 conference schools for Jim Leonhard, and I wonder if there wasn't some smoke going on there. See how I tied that into the show? If there wasn't a little smoke going on there, that Wisconsin said, okay, if we're going to do this at the end of the year, we better do it now before we miss an opportunity at our own guy.
Yeah, it isn't the exact example, but Lincoln Riley in Oklahoma, when he took over for Bob Stoops, they just kind of like, let's go get this done right now. We feel like we got the guy. Let's, let Bob have his dignity. They didn't fire him, but, it was basically like, hey, we're keeping Lincoln. And, I kind of get the same vibe with Jim Leonhard, especially with Nebraska, being one of those jobs that he's potentially been tied to.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so one more thing on the NFL, and Paul brought up Aaron Rodgers. Gutty, tough, maybe more so than most thought, but your thoughts about the Packers? They always have a little hickey early on, and here they are. They're 3-1.
Yeah, that opening loss at Minnesota, and yesterday getting an overtime win. I work on the Packers radio network too on the pregame show. So I was at Lambeau yesterday when this news broke in Madison. But Aaron said post-game last night that winning this way is not sustainable. They need to be more versatile in what they do in the passing game and what the offense is doing. Shoot, Aaron Rodgers yesterday had a quarterback rating of 10. I believe it was 10 in the first half. Now, I finished close to 90, but it was his worst half in his NFL career as far as just the numbers are concerned. I believe he had 4 completed passes in the first half. This team has to find a way to transition more quickly out of the Devontae Adams era, and Aaron has to lead that. Romeo Doubs, who played at Nevada, is going to be really good. Christian Watson, who was an early draft choice out of North Dakota State, the kid is very talented, but they're going to have to be better in the passing game, and Aaron's trust and those wide receivers earning his trust for this team to get where they want to get. That being said, they're going to get to 6-1. They play the Giants this week, then they're in London. They're home with the Jets, and then they play Washington. So they're going to get to 6-1, and I think the game after that is against Buffalo. So it gets awfully interesting with Buffalo and Philadelphia and Dallas on the schedule later on.
Well, that sounds juicy. Thanks a lot, Mike. Appreciate your time. Thanks for jumping on with us after a long weekend. That's Mike Heller. He covers the Packers and also Wisconsin with some of his thoughts about the change of Paul Chryst as head coach.
I mean, just